You can't do that, Dylan. Me? I can do anything. But this business is run with my money, the money I made from the sale of my apartment. Can you prove it? Do you have money for lawyers? What's going on? I don't understand. We're husband and wife. All right, I'll explain for the brightest. When we got married, we were young. We were stupid. I knew right then that you were a simpleton, but it wasn't a big deal back then. Now that I'm doing serious business, I don't need a wife like you. You're as simple as a rake. I need a different kind of wife for my status. You know, one that's model-like, that accentuates my status. And you're just a cook. Octavia looked at her husband in amazement. Was he really telling her all this now? Dylan, her husband, suddenly laughed and began wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. So, when you were selling my apartment, I was good for you? And when I did all your bookkeeping for you day and night and looked for clients, I was right for you too? And when I dusted you off, was I right for you? And now it's not like that? With a sinking heart, asked Octavia. Well, here, a little bit of brains still you have. You know, you don't belong here. Dylan laughed like a horse again. I get it, but you know what? It's not going to work out. I'm registered in this apartment. You can get out if you want. Octavia went into the bedroom and deliberately slammed the door loudly. Dylan hummed. It's no use. You do realize that I'll throw you out of here, he shouted after Octavia, and then packed up and left, probably to visit his new model-looking girlfriend. Well, let him go. So he's on the horse and Octavia's a dishwasher. She'll see who cleans the toilets. Octavia clenched her fist to the point of pain. It's been a while. No one in town was doing this kind of business, so his business had been booming for a few years now. But recently, a firm had come along that was rapidly gaining momentum, and in just a month, he'd had major clients walk away from it. Today, Dylan received a report that ruined his mood completely. He was extremely angry, discouraged, even went home early. Nina, his new fling, met him in the hallway. Honey, you're not yourself. What happened? You've been singing about the sea for months, and you do not keep your word. And the wedding? The girl whined. I have problems in my business, but don't worry. Soon everything will fall into place, and you will have the sea and the beach, and restaurants with a beautiful view, reassured her Dylan. Do you have a problem? Nina's voice became serious. Are they big? A little, but don't worry, everything will be fine. Dylan smiled housely. But Nina didn't want trouble. She just wasn't ready for it. She wanted a life of luxury, not this trouble. What about dinner? Dylan asked. I don't know, I'm hungry too. Nina flew by, and I fired the housekeeper. How? This is the third housekeeper in 3 months. Well, then cook for yourself. I'm going to take a shower, and when I come back, I want to see dinner on the table. Dylan said in anger and left. He was furious. Work was a mess, and he had no home to live in either. What did Nina do all day? When Dylan came out of the shower, there was silence in the apartment. Where had Nina gone? Dylan went to the kitchen, thinking that Nina was working on dinner. The kitchen was empty. Dinner was gone too. Dylan was bubbling with rage. He quickly dialed Nina. Where are you? He asked, barely able to contain his anger. Walking, said Nina mundanely. And dinner? Dylan didn't understand. I'm not a maid. If you're hungry, go to a restaurant. And if you don't have enough money, order a pizza. Nina answered defiantly. Come home right now. We need to talk. Dylan demanded. Now talk. Nina clearly didn't want to go back. Remember when I gave you the money to fix the house? I need it right away, Dylan said. There was silence on the other end of the line. I'll give it back to you when everything's right. I don't have it, Nina blurted out. What do you mean you don't have them? You didn't buy anything. Dylan was concerned. I didn't know how I ran out of pennies. Do I have to account for every cent? And Nina immediately hung up. No matter how much Dylan tried to call her, it was in vain. The subscriber was unavailable. The man found a sandwich in the refrigerator and chewed it sluggishly. And then he thought, Octavia wouldn't do that. And in general, their house was always clean, smelled like a delicious diner. When did she have time to do everything? Both at work and at home, everything was on her. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. It was Nina. Dylan rejoiced, but it was a regular client of his firm, and he said dryly that the contract was expiring and they would not be renewing it. Dylan almost dropped the phone. Acorns were good until bread was found, You know what I mean. The customer said goodbye. Dylan threw the phone on the table in anger. He was no longer hungry either. He sat down and began to think frantically. In the morning, Dylan took out a huge loan. As collateral, he had left a deed to his house, and there was a new surprise at work. His best computer specialist was quitting. Jacob, why? Do I not pay you enough? Dylan was perplexed. I found another job, Jacob said briefly. That was the end of it. Jacob was holding on to everything. Dylan's firm was crumbling like a house of cards. The money he'd taken out on credit flowed like water, and Nina came back and helped him spend it. A couple of months later, a representative from the bank paid him a visit. Dylan was told if he didn't pay the debt to the bank in 3 days, he would be without a house. And Dylan didn't care anymore. He would live in an office. Only how was Nina? Although she rarely comes home now. And the man suddenly understood everything. Octavia would not let him mortgage the house. She would be able to negotiate with both customers and suppliers. After all, she was the one who had once found them. Where is this Octavia now? What is she doing? After learning that Dylan was moving into the office, Nina packed her things and Dylan wasn't holding her back. After spending the night at the office, Dylan realized he couldn't go on like this. Action had to be taken. He told the assistants to find the head of the rival firm and set up a meeting, smooth out the rough edges. The assistant left and a wave of nostalgia hit Dylan. Well, what was he missing in his life? Well, what did he see in that empty-headed Nina? Now he has no Octavia, no Nina, no home, and no business either. How long he had been thinking like that, I don't know. An assistant came into the office. We're agreed to meet you, he said to Dylan, at 7 p.m. at the restaurant on the waterfront. Dylan began to work. He needed numbers. He had to prove a mutual benefit. He was interrupted by Nina, who literally burst into the office. It's simple. She had been chased away by a new boyfriend, but Dylan told her that he didn't need such a sophisticated lady either. Nina, snorting, rushed away from the office. The time for the meeting was approaching. Dylan had prepared for it thoroughly, so he got out the cab, walking into the building. A hostess immediately jumped up to him and escorted him to a table. There were 2 people at the table, a man and a woman. As he looked into their faces, Dylan turned pale. He would have given anything to fall under the ground, but there was no turning back. It was Octavia, and sitting next to her was Jacob, the computer genius. What a meeting. I see you're doing well, love, apparently, Dylan said sarcastically. He was furious. He turned to the waiter who was passing by. I have a meeting here, and you've led me to this table. Apparently it's a mistake. You'll be more specific, okay? He said to the guy. There is no mistake. The meeting is with me, voiced Octavia. I own the rival firm. Are you the one who ruined me? Yelled Dylan. It's business, you know? The money for the company I gave you from the sale of the apartment, and you threw me out on the street without a penny of money. By the way, I know my niche very well. All the clients and suppliers know me and want to work with me. You are nothing to them. You miscalculated a little bit, husband. However, no wonder. You are now exactly where you should be. Justice has finally been restored. Octavia told him sternly. Dylan's plan has collapsed. And where is your beauty? Octavia suddenly asked. Laugh, heartless! Dylan exploded. All the customers began to look at them. Me? I just opened a business, that's all. Blame only yourself, dear, retorted Octavia with a chuckle. You do not tell me what to do. Dylan turned pale with rage. So, why did you want to meet? Octavia took the conversation in another direction. Dylan was silent. He had already figured out where to shove his pride and find the right words, but he couldn't help himself. He stood and watched Jacob and the Octavia get up from their seats. And then he noticed that she had an engagement ring on her hand, but a different ring than the one Dylan had once given to her. When Octavia stood up, the man was taken aback. She was expecting a baby. I see you didn't waste any time, he said before he could finish, a kick to the teeth knocking him over. Jacob stood over him, rubbing his fist. Don't you ever insult my wife. Jacob was furious. Come on, honey. Octavia took his hand and they walked toward the exit. Dylan walked away too. He sat down on a bench on the boardwalk and thought about it, rubbing his cheekbone. When you feel bad, you have to find out why, someone said philosophically. Dylan looked up and saw a homeless man sitting nearby. The man thought about his words. The homeless man staggered away. Dylan thought, what had he done wrong? He had done everything wrong. He had taken everything, even things that didn't belong to him. He had robbed Octavia of the chance to live normally in her home, which he loved so much, and God punished him for it. Dylan suddenly understood everything. Of course, you have to do the right thing in good conscience. Octavia and Jacob were having tea. They had just recently moved into this apartment. It was small, but they had to live somewhere. Octavia loved her husband very much, and the apartment had become very cozy in just a few months. The doorbell rang. Jacob went to open it. Voices were heard in the hallway. Someone was arguing. Octavia wanted to come out, but Dylan appeared in the kitchen, followed by an enraged Jacob. The woman looked at her ex-husband with surprise. He was without his usual austere suit, in some sort of marching uniform. Dylan took off his backpack and pulled out some papers. Octavia, look! I realize that I'm a complete idiot and a fool and everything. I get it, there's no going back. I sincerely wish you happiness. Here, these are the company papers. Of course, there's not much left, but what you have is rightfully yours, Dylan said. Octavia looked at him confused. That's right, I should have done it right away. Everything is already signed here. He held out the papers to Octavia. And you? Octavia was perplexed. I go away. I will open another business. That's all. Goodbye, everyone. He walked quickly to the door. The woman could not utter a word. Jacob caught up and stopped him. Don't hold it against me, and good luck, he said to Dylan. He nodded briefly and ran down the steps. A new life awaited him. He had just bid farewell to his old life, and he did not know whether he would go back. Should he? He had nothing and no one to blame but himself. The main thing was to make sure there were no such mistakes ahead.